Today's episode, I speak to Sam Warner about autistic people in the corporate workplace. Sam talks about her experiences and how companies can make it easier for autistic people to thrive. We discuss whether an autistic person should disclose their autism at the interview stage and what reasonable adjustments can be made. On the flip side, there are many benefits to having an autistic brain, and an autistic person should share these with their future or current employer. This is an interesting conversation around autism in the workplace and a realisation that good Maverick leadership enables all employees to thrive. Listen up to the rest of the conversation. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke Maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today our guest is Sam Warner. Hi Sam.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm groovy, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I expect you to be dancing when you say that you're groovy.
There's a lot of dancing in my house, yeah.
Which is brilliant. Before we get into our conversation, tell us about you.
Wow, that's a massive question, especially for someone who's autistic.
That is true.
I'll narrow it down by letting you know that I'm 47. I live in Telford in Shropshire. I'm married to David. We have no children, and we usually have cats, but not at the moment. I used to work for corporate. Oh, yes, until I saw the error of my ways.
And how was that? As you said, you mentioned that you're autistic, and I do a lot of leadership training, and I ensure that I train leaders to understand how to work with autistic people. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious how you found working in a corporate whilst being autistic.
Well, to start with, I didn't know I was autistic, so I didn't know that it was really difficult in a way that wasn't difficult for other people, because I don't know what it's like inside other people's heads. Who does? But I didn't fully appreciate the effort that I was having to spend. Masking is the correct term.
Yeah.
Where I'm pretending to be like everyone else. I'm conforming. I'm double checking what I'm going to say before I say it. I'm selectively going through almost like flow diagrams in my head to assess whether this is the appropriate response to this scenario, rather than just being myself. And so I did find corporate exhausting, but I didn't know why, because I didn't know I was autistic until I was 35. Like I say, I'm 47 now. So it was an aha moment when I figured it out. And it made a lot more sense, because I was like, oh, that's why I like working with blokes. Because they say what they mean and mean what they say.
That's what they say. They do say that autistic females are more like neurotypical males.
Yeah, I suppose, a bit like that, especially in terms of language. And quite often we get labelled as a gender if we're too direct and there's not enough sort of fluff around the edges or small talk, that we're ball breakers and we're bitches and and we're climbing over everyone's dead bodies to get to the top. Well, actually, would you say that about a guy? Probably not.
Yeah, exactly. What led you to finding out? Did you get a diagnosis at 35, or did you just decide that you were because you've read some stuff? I mean, what happened?
So it started with doing an online thing, right? We did an online thing, all of us at work, and I was working in an IT firm at the time, and I scored highest, even above all the autistic guys that were there. Okay, there's something in this. And I was encouraged to go to my doctor to see if I could seek a formal diagnosis, which I did. And when I went to the doctor, you can't argue with logic, you know. So I'm married, I'm fully functioning in society, I own my own home, I drive a car, I've worked since I came out of uni, and there are no perceivable benefits for me to get a formal diagnosis because I don't require accommodations in a job or whatever in her eyes. And I was like, but I need to know, not because I'm searching for a label, but because actually I want to be reassured that I'm not just imagining this, and I'm not sort of wishing that I'm autistic because everything's so hard. So I was unable to persuade her, and I was unable to persuade another doctor because I went for a second opinion, obviously. And so I thought, right, okay, well, let's figure this out. And I spoke to multiple people who do, I would call, informal diagnosis. So they are very experienced. They've seen hundreds and hundreds of people who are all seeking a diagnosis. So they'll do like a review with them to figure out what kind of language they might want to use when they go and see the doctor. And it became apparent to all of them. There wasn't one person that said, oh, no, you're not autistic or you're borderline. It was always, oh, yeah, definitely. So to have that endorsement from people who see autistic people all the time was actually a much bigger yes for me than going to a psychiatrist who probably only covered autism in a couple of weeks when they went and did their degree.
Or they only see it in children.
Yeah. How can you possibly measure me against a male child?
I know, it's good to see though that autism diagnosis, they're actually broadening it out and factoring females now and recognising that the girls will display differently to the guys, which is really good. So you say the GP said that you didn't need any accommodations. Would you have said that you needed accommodations?
Well, certainly at that point I had to agree with the GP because there was a bit of ego, a bit of pride about, I don't need any special things. I'm fine, thanks very much. You know, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not broken. But there was also an element of, I had spent so long accommodating for myself that I didn't understand that accommodations could be made for me to help me. And so that I didn't have to struggle all the time. I didn't know what those accommodations could be.
Yes, yeah.
So it's like I don't know what I don't know. So how can I ask for something if I don't know if it even exists?
No, it makes a lot of sense. And the accommodations quite often aren't much. Do you know what I mean? I think when it comes to neurodiversity, there's a big concern as to how would that work within an organisation. So I think sometimes people have a view of autism like Rain Man or The Good Doctor or something like that. So they either have this highly functioning savant intelligence, but everything else is falling apart, or they have somebody really severe. It's almost as if, in layman terms, there's no normality in autism. Would that be fair to say?
That's a really tricky one. The word normal is very for me. What the heck is normal? I think the difficulty is that, particularly on film and in TV series, we often get to see a stereotypical portrayal of someone with autism. So they're usually either Rain Man, where savant, where he'll always be in care. He'll never be able to hold down a job. He'll never have a romantic relationship. And quite often people who are needing care have other comorbidities. So that means, that they've got other things going on for them, which makes life even harder. It might be that they've got Tourette's or Down syndrome or something else. So it's like layer upon layer of challenge for them. Or then you've got portrayals of the sort of superpower thing, the expert genius, like The Good Doctor or Bones or Sherlock Holmes. And you think, well, that's lovely to watch. And I do enjoy watching those programs very much. But if that's what people think autism looks like in all autistic people, then that's not helpful.
No. So what is helpful? I mean, I know that organisations often think it's quite difficult. If somebody, it's difficult. I think it's difficult for somebody who's a candidate because they're not sure whether they should disclose their autism at interview or not. And sometimes when people have disclosed their autism, they haven't got the job, but they don't know if that's because they disclosed it or not. And if they're in an organisation and people then find out, then there's this concern about how will you work with an autistic person and what should you do. So what do you think? I mean, is it hard to employ an autistic person?
Yeah, so taking that interview scenario, to disclose or not to disclose, I would suggest that before disclosing for themselves, excuse me, they should ask about the inclusion and diversity policy that they have. So it's not unreasonable to ask an organisation, could you tell me a bit about your inclusion and diversity programme? What things have you put in place? What training is there for your employees? I'm really very interested in this subject and I'd love to know, because they'll always ask you, what questions have you got in your interview?
That's a good one.
And then you'll really get a flavour of where they are in their inclusion and diversity. Is it, well, we all do a computer-based training program that takes 20 minutes and you've got to pass the 70% test and you're done, which a lot of organisations do, tick. Or is it actually that they are actively encouraging diversity into their teams because they know the massive benefits that it brings and they're actually really at the front of the curve? So that's a really great way to gauge whether it's a safe space to reveal that you're autistic. And also just, I don't know, there's a feeling in the room sometimes. If you're getting on with someone well and they seem very approachable, that might be someone who's quite open-minded and easy to talk to. So you might feel comfortable in sharing that with them. And I would go ahead and tell them all the benefits that you enjoy by having a different brain. If you're going to do that, go straight in there with, do you know what? I have to share with you, I am so lucky I have an autistic brain because I can do, I don't know, hyperfocus. I can, what can I do? Gosh, there's so many things I can do. I'm an ideas generator. I'm a machine. When people need ideas, it just comes out of me. Whether you need the 100 ideas, it might be just 2 work, but if you didn't have the 100, you wouldn't find the 2. I'm a great problem solver. I can see things from sort of helicopter view, but I can come down into the detail if I need to, and then come back up to helicopter view. I can notice things in the room that other people don't notice, and that might be facial expressions. It might be a nuance or a tone, because I've trained myself to look for that stuff. And those kind of extra attributes you might not have in your team already, but I can bring those to your team, all of those things. And it might be that I need a couple of accommodations just in balance, because, we can't all be superheroes. Make light of it, make it sound like you're not a problem. You're not bringing pain to them. You're actually bringing benefit to them. And say things, that you do need. So actually, if I was going to go back and work for somebody in an organisation, I would say, I really need peace and quiet from time to time in order to completely focus on my work and do a fantastic job. It makes me super productive if I can just shut off the outside world. So if it's an open plan office, I'd really appreciate if I could be by a wall or in a corner, away from a door and away from the drinks machine or the photocopier where there's lots of people coming up all the time. So a quiet spot in the office would be fantastic, because I appreciate you can't give me an office of my own necessarily. But also from time to time, I might need to put my headphones on so that I can cut out the phones going off, the chatter, someone's brought their baby in, there's somebody clicking a pen, all sorts of things going on that are constantly interrupting my concentration. And when you start listing those things, they go, oh yeah, actually, I hate that about the office too. I totally get that. because most people don't like all those things. It's not just autistic people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I did some work, I think it must be a couple of years ago, in an organisation, and I understand the hot desking principle and open planning, because, you know, who hasn't done that in the years? But what was quite different about this particular place is that they had decided that every single person would be hot desking, and there'd be no, so rather than having some hot desks, it was like everyone's hot desking. So you walk, so nobody had their own place to personalise. I think one advantage, I suppose, it meant that everybody came to work early because so they could choose their favourite desks. So, you know, so everybody ended up working longer hours because they had to get the desk. But there was the noise in the area was unbelievable. It was absolutely impossible to concentrate. And I'm an extrovert. I'm the person that likes noise to concentrate. But you couldn't hear it because you'd have people talking, people doing Skype calls without headsets. You know, it was just mental. And it was just like, it's absolutely impossible to do any work at all. Like, because even if you was having a phone call, you couldn't hear what that person was saying on the phone because somebody else is shouting over the noise because they've not got a headset on to talk to someone who's, you know, on a video call. And I just think, you know, it's not just autistic people couldn't cope, but it was just such a weird idea because productivity went down so significantly. It was because I was in there to do some work for a small period of time, and I went there before they moved desks. So I went there where it was an office environment, normal office environment. You knew everybody where everybody was, to this free for all. And if you're new and you have to ask questions, because I was a consultant on something, I couldn't remember who anybody was, and I couldn't use where they sat as a clue. So I was going, and it meant that people weren't even in the same department. So you could ask somebody a question, they're like, I don't work in that department. You're like, oh, okay. So then you've
mentioned something really important there. So because I have dysgraphia, I find it very difficult to remember people's faces over and over. So I have to meet someone about 10 times before I've really nailed in that person's face with their name and perhaps where they work. It has to happen many times. It doesn't just happen over once or twice. You know, other people will have experienced it. You see someone in the supermarket and they go, "Hi, Jude, how you doing?" And you're desperately going, "Oh gosh, who are you and where are you from?" Because you're in the wrong place. Exactly. Because you meet them somewhere else normally.
And then this time they've got a hat on or something. And you're like, don't know you with a hat.
Exactly.
Never seen a hat.
They're a police officer and they're in civvies, and your brain just can't connect and make that, you know, that, oh, who are they? Well, that's what it's like for me pretty much all the time with people. So I have to quite often apologize and say, please forgive me if we've met before. I'm not fantastic with faces, but if you tell me your name, I'll know if we've met before. And normally, if, you know, as long as you're smiling when you say stuff like that, people are okay with it. But certainly in terms of recognizing people, because people don't wear name badges like they used to anymore. They might wear a lanyard, but quite often you can't even see it.
You can't see it because people do put it so that you can't see it, because nobody likes their pictures being shown, do they?
No, or in their pocket or clipped on.
And you don't want to be looking down at the end of the tie to be able to see what the name was.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's really unhelpful.
What advice would you give to a HR team or a leader in an organisation on they've just been told they've got an autistic member of staff? What would you say to them to make that easier for the autistic person and the organisation?
So in order for them to be told that there's an autistic person in the team, I would have to make a leap and say that person is self-aware and knows they're autistic. Because, of course, there's also the other side where you've got someone who you think, yeah, this person's really autistic, but they don't know it. So how can you help them? So that's a kind of a slightly different story, but happens all the time. Yes. And I usually end up having to go in to help. And that's fine. That's what I'm here for. And but when someone has revealed I'm autistic and I might need some accommodations, it's really, really helpful for the autistic person to be clear about what they struggle with and what they need, so that the other person, the team leader or whomever, can be clear about what's within their power to meet them on those accommodations. So I might say, I need an office completely on my own with a door I can shut. Well, that's
it's not going to
happen. So the compromise is, okay, could I be sat in the corner of a room in a desk that's always mine? Because actually change really, really skyrockets my anxiety.
Yeah.
And if I was to think that I've been made late by traffic coming into work, and now I have to sit in the middle or by the door or by the drinks machine or whatever, I may as well just go home.
Yes. People always wouldn't come to work, isn't it?
Yeah. And maybe there's something about, if the accommodation side of things at the office can't be changed for some reason, is there a way to meet that person halfway in terms of letting them work from home for a couple of days a week? If they don't have to be in meetings constantly in person, then there's definitely benefit from allowing them to create a safe space for themselves where they can be super productive. Because that's all we want from our employees, don't we? We want them to be happy and productive and not be absent.
Exactly.
So why would you create that environment?
So I'd imagine that for some autistic people, this whole working from home thing has presented a whole new set of problems.
And opportunities.
Yeah.
So businesses will have realised that the old myth of working from home is people watching Netflix all day and occasionally answering their phone is actually 1 in 1,000 people do that. And you need to deal with that individual, just that individual. But what tends to happen in an organisation is you get someone who does that, and then they whitewash everybody with the same rules, right? No one can work from home. Why? Just because this one person who can't play the rules, deal with that person instead. We're working fine. And what they've realised, now they've been forced to allow people to work from home, is that people are really productive. They probably work longer hours actually working than they did when they were in the office, because occasionally you're getting up to get a drink, you're chatting, you're sitting in meetings all the time. Meetings tend to be shorter now, they're on Zoom. People just want to get it done and get off because they're sick of Zoom. And people are kind of, they've took back charge of the time in their day. And I've been encouraging organisations to say to their staff, try to leave whole afternoons where everybody has no meetings. So that if you've got a project or horrible spreadsheet stuff or whatever, something that really needs your 100% attention, you're not going to get interrupted. That's just golden, because you just don't normally get that. But when you do that, people become super productive, deadlines are met, people take on extra work because now they've been able to get their day-to-day stuff out of the way. So many people are 100% committed on things, and then they're expected to do extra stuff as part of their job, like admin or training or all that sort of stuff. Well, if you don't give them some bandwidth to do those things, then they'll never get done.
Okay. So if you're in a scenario where you've got someone who's autistic who has been working very well in the office, maybe because they've had some additional support or there's a routine that they understand, and they're now working from home, and they're struggling because, say, they've got a bit of a tech addiction going on, or the routine is different, and there's no one has supported setting up a new routine.
Yeah.
What would you suggest? Because I know that neurotypical people have severely struggled from that. Because everybody has a routine, don't they? They have I go to work routine. Get my cup of coffee, I stop off at here, I go on there, and then that's gone, and that has caused a lot of issues for neurotypical people. And I'm just wondering how that would affect, say, I know all autistic people are different, but an autistic person who really is routine driven, who needs to be told, for example, you put your phone down, stop doing this, but they don't have that oversight because they're on their own at home, maybe, or they're working from home, and so is the rest of the family. So maybe the quiet that used to exist in the office doesn't exist at home now because there's a dog running around and there's, I don't know, children or parents or somebody else working, or maybe they can't even get on a PC.
Absolutely, yeah. So there are challenges. I won't just whitewash it with it's a great opportunity,
because it is. But we also know there's challenges.
Yeah, there are definitely challenges, and it's about finding a way to bring a new routine in, and that's for everybody, not just for autistic people. And not all autistic people love routine. Some people feel like they're in prison when there's a routine. I'm not a big fan of routine. I actually really like to mix it up. I plan things, but I like to leave, I don't know, the mornings and the evenings looser. So I can move things around depending on my sleep pattern, because I have ADHD, so my sleep's really interesting. Sometimes I get 4 hours, sometimes I get 10, sometimes I don't get any. And that's just the way I'm wired. And I just have to be able to adapt my day depending on how the night's gone. So a routine for me would be a nightmare. And actually working 9 to 5 was very, very difficult, because sometimes I'd be turning up to work having had 2 or 3 hours sleep, really not at my best. Whereas I could have been doing some sleep in the morning and then turning up at lunchtime and then working my 8 hours. So finding that routine, if you can't find your own routine, there's an element of that self-advocacy about reaching out and saying, do you know what, I could really do with some help here. Because if you're not missing deadlines and you're being productive and you're doing the work you're doing, if you're on your phone all day as well, that's fine. Who cares? Who cares if you've got Netflix on in the background, if you're delivering all of your deliverables on time and to a high quality?
Yeah, I suppose it's that's the concern would be, wouldn't it? Whether both can happen.
People on their output, not on their bums on seats.
Yeah. I've always said that
I could get all of my work done in 4 hours of an 8-hour day, and I'm not required to perhaps bring work forward. So it might be that actually my working day at home is 4 hours, and then the other 4 hours I just make sure I'm available by email and phone.
Yeah.
And that should be all right.
I've always said that if you're leading and you lead that accommodates, say, someone who is autistic, whether you have autistic people or not, then you actually will be leading quite well, because the things that make an autistic person's life easier are the sort of things that you should do anyway.
Yes, absolutely, Jude. You've hit the nail on the head. There's no losers here.
No.
The inner child comes out sometimes in teams where they think, oh, you're special, you need special accommodations. How come you get to start at 10:30 every morning because you're not a morning person? I want to start at 10:30. Okay, so have you asked for that? No. Okay, ask for it then. Tell them why you need to start at 10:30. And don't forget, that means you're not going home till 8 o'clock. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different from years ago when I was in HR working in London, and there was this heavily pregnant lady who had issues in the past with, miscarriages and things, and she was really nervous coming to work. And I just said, don't come in the rush hours. So come after rush hour and leave after rush hour. And everybody was like really shocked, and they were like, that's so unfair. And I was like, why? Because it wasn't like her work wasn't customer facing in the sense that she had to be there at particular hours. She just had to do the work.
Yeah.
And it was just considered so scandalous back in whenever it was, a long time ago. And it was just like, to me, it sounds like common sense, because the alternative is that she signed off sick for the next next so many months. So you might as well just do it.
And it's still happening. From time to time, I've done a bit of temping because it suits me to dip my toe back into the corporate pond, keep in touch with the people I'm helping. So I might do a couple of weeks temping here or there. And it's systemic. It's still going on. That sort of schoolyard, it's not fair kind of mentality. And we just need to lose it. We just need to. And part of the problem is that managers that come in are trained by previous managers, so they're perpetuating bad habits.
Yeah, it needs some Maverick leadership, I think.
Yes,
to look a bit different,
fresh, and say, how would you do it? Like that.
Exactly. So tell me, what are the benefits of having an autistic person on the team?
Oh, well, so every autistic person is different, just like every neurotypical person is different, and they have talents and they have abilities even that are precious to them, because they only know what's in their head, and sometimes it's hard for them to articulate it, but sometimes if you observe, you can see the genius, I'm going to use that word, genius, in them, or the talent in them. But what they really bring is that very special, different angled view. So where you've got a team where they've always done what they've always done in the same way, and they keep getting the same results, and there's no real change, it's all very ploddy, perhaps they're having trouble solving some problems. Most autistic people are fantastic at problem solving for other people. And they will come up with lots of ideas, they'll come in at a different angle, they'll ask quite blunt questions at times, which again a lot of neurotypical people won't, because they think it's rude, when actually sometimes you just need to ask a blunt question. It's like the elephant in the room. So why don't we just do it like this? Oh right, okay, oh yeah, you're not wrong actually. And someone has an aha moment. Also that ability to hyperfocus. So if someone gives me a project that requires my full attention and they need it quickly, I could work all night on that project if I wanted to deliver it. You might say, oh, well, I don't want you to work all night on it. But actually, if you get a really high quality product at the end and you can give me a day off in lieu afterwards, we're golden. So, and the project might be better quality because I did it all in one go, because I was in flow, like an artist might be in flow, than if I was to do it in chunks and have to keep picking it up and scratching my head and going, where was I?
Yeah, which is always irritating.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think autistic people bring a freshness of language. So whether they're aware or not aware of their autism, most people who are autistic ask questions. And in my experience in corporate, that's 20 plus years, a lot of other people don't ask questions. They seem to just accept woolly instructions. And then once the person's gone, they'll go, so do you think they mean this, or do you mean?
I've never understood why people. In fact, I've just done a coaching session actually, and I said, rather than worrying about whether they think this or that, why don't you just ask? Because to me, as a Maverick leader, that seems to make the most sense, because it's less effort. If I'm not sure.
People are worried about what people will think of them, or if I ask that question they'll think I don't know stuff and that I'm not up to the job.
But you don't know stuff, that's why you need to ask questions.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fair. It's a fair comment, really, so do something about it.
Yeah, exactly. If I was a leader, I'd rather have somebody in my team asking me questions to clarify. And in fact, as a leader, when I'm giving somebody an instruction for a task I want them to do, what I will tend to do is say, and now could you just tell me back what you think you're going to do in this task? It'd be really useful for me to know whether I've used the right language. So you give them permission to tell you back. And it's a bit like, when you learn something, if you can teach someone else, you've really got it.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you allow them that space and time to say back to you what they heard you say, that's when you can pick out the points that perhaps didn't land. And you can say, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, now I've got it.
So what I think one of the benefits about autistic people in the workplace is that they don't succumb to groupthink, because they're really comfortable saying, well, they're really comfortable thinking this makes no sense. But whether they express it or not will depend on the environment that they're in. So they might have high anxiety, so will not express that. But which would be a complete loss to the organisation. So that's why I go back to saying, if you run it as if you had an autistic person, then you're better off, because you would have people who are comfortable saying, nah, Emperor's naked. Pretty sure, no, not even underwear. Definitely naked. And I think everybody benefits from that.
Definitely. So a big thing that I work on with people is ego. And certainly I know we're generalizing a lot in some of the things that we're saying, but in my experience of working with autistic people, they have a lack of ego.
Yes.
And a lot of people will think, oh, they're really selfish. Actually, they're all ego. And I'm like, no. They're not selfish. They're trying to survive. Big difference. When you're
I
trying
always
to
say they're not selfish, they're self-interested. And I think there's a big difference between that.
Absolutely. And again, most autistic people I know are altruistic. They're always looking for how they can help other people for nothing in return. And, you know, that quite often they're animal lovers. They're very kind. They want the best. They're very hippie-ish, actually, in outlook. They want
groovy.
Groovy. They want everyone to love each other and be peaceful and no wars and no.
Yes, actually, it's a purity in humanity in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't want conflict. We don't want confrontation. Those things are horrible. So, we're great peacemakers. It's very unusual to get an autistic person who's aggressive because they want war, of any kind, even a language war. If they appear to be aggressive, it's usually because they're actually angry and they're frustrated anxious. And they don't know how to express it, because none of us are taught how to express those emotions in a healthy way, whether we're autistic or not.
So really it goes back to just good leadership. So having an autistic person in your team is no more difficult than having a Maverick in your team or a genius in your team or anything that is different from quote unquote normal. Because I suppose in the same way you would, if you had somebody who was in a wheelchair, you would make sure there was a ramp. You wouldn't just leave them stuck on the first floor. You'd do something about it.
Yeah.
Then if you had an autistic person that need help with transitions, you would say, we're going to have a meeting in 10 minutes. I mean, how hard is that? Or you show them how to set their Outlook so it pings 20 minutes before the meeting, so there's no shock. It takes a bit of effort, but isn't it effort that a good leader should expend for anybody anyway?
Absolutely. And not only encouraging your team to become self-aware and be better communicators, clearer communicators, but to become self-aware themselves. Quite often a leader or a manager will send their team members off to get trained in things when actually they need to be there too. They need to be trained in the same way so that you're a cohesive group. Yes. And now you're leading in terms of, this is the vision, this is the mission, this is the goal, this is the way we're going, and I will help you to help me get there. And that's the relationship of a leader. I think managers, that's the older way, if you like, rather than leader. And I think I certainly have experienced micromanagement where someone's constantly at me, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? All that sort of stuff.
And no one likes that.
Nobody likes that. But I teach people, whether you're autistic or not, how to manage upwards. So if someone is like that, I would recommend that you say to that person, do you know what? We have a break time in the morning, break time in the afternoon, and we have lunchtime. How about we get together straight after break time, and I'll tell you what I've done this morning and what I plan to do before lunch. And it'll also give me a chance to ask you any questions I might have. Then we can meet again after lunch and do the same thing. And then we can meet again after the break in the afternoon, and then I'll crack on for the rest of the day. How does that suit you? Chances are that person's going to bite your hand off, because you've come to them and let them know that you want to keep them informed and updated and included, etc. You're going to be actively doing the task they're asking you to do, so they can stop worrying about whether you're doing the task or not. And it's usually because they've had poor experience in the past that they have these behaviours. And they feel respected because you're checking in with them. And you get that space. You know that person's now not going to keep coming up to you going, how's it going? How's it going?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think that's a really good place to end. Before we do that, though, is there anything that I should have asked you, or are you really dying to say something about?
It's the ego. That's the only thing I would like to say is do some work on yourself, regardless of what your brain is like. Become self-aware, work on your ego, Our ego is very fragile and it needs taking care of. So find out how to take care of your ego that doesn't negatively impact other people.
Brilliant. I think that's fantastic. Would you come back again, Sam, if we find another topic to talk about?
Oh, I'd love to.
Brilliant. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Sam as much as I enjoyed having it. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. And finally, if you would like to work with us or just interested in finding out more about the Maverick at work, check out our website maverickparadox.co.uk.